Adequate notice of the, roll call, excuse me, people.
Okay,
Okay. Mr. Leonard,
Here.
Mr. Walter,
Here.
Mr. First.
can you hear us? Can't hear us.
I'm here. I can hear you and I had a problem clicking off.
Great, thank you. Ms. Christie? Here. Chairwoman Gotcha.
I'm here.
Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the township clerk, sent to the Burnsville News and the Courier News, and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 6, 2022.
Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
One nation, under God,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
There you go. All right. Right on time, Rich.
Just said it would be the flag salute.
Okay, I'll open it up to the public if they have anything that they would like to comment or have a question about or talk about that's not on the agenda. Look and see. Janine, if you have anybody online,
If there's anyone online, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself, or I believe it's from your phone, you can do a *9. Anything not on the agenda tonight for public comment?
seeing no one in the audience. Okay, we will close the public session. We have minutes that we need to approve. We have first our July 7th minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve July 7th minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anybody have to recuse themselves, Janine?
Anna were absent for that one.
And they still are.
also absent. So,
All right,
yeah,
all right, minutes from the 7th are approved. And we also have July 14th minutes that need to be approved.
I'll make a motion to approve July 14th minutes.
Second.
Okay, anyone, okay, anyone need to recuse themselves from those minutes?
Lou.
Okay. He's not here. Okay, so the minutes,
On both of those sets of minutes, just,
Hello, can anybody hear me?
yes,
Okay. Are we doing the minutes? I'm sorry, my Zoom's been giving me trouble, but what minutes are we doing now?
July 14th.
Okay, I'm not enthusiastic about what's been prepared for that meeting for the minutes.
I'm not understanding what you're saying, George.
I don't approve of the minutes.
Oh, okay, all right,
So he's in it.
okay,
okay, so we,
They don't reflect some of the major discussions that took place at the meeting, and I would like them to reflect that.
okay. If there's something that needs to be said, we can have them added to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen now. I'd be happy to send the information to Janine offline or if you want.
George, the July 14th meeting minutes, we were only in session for 5 minutes.
Wait, then it's the other meeting, the meeting where we talked about plan endorsement.
Okay. So,
Those minutes are not acceptable. They need to reflect the discussions that took place about the people that were not in favor of plan endorsement. Okay? Nothing is mentioned about that. It was a very important discussion that needs to be included, in my opinion, as Tom would say.
Tom,
well, one of the things you didn't do yet is you didn't actually call the roll or say aye for those minutes.
for the
For the-
7th?
For either one, you did a motion and a second, but I was gonna ask you to please say aye or nay. You could do that vote now.
Okay,
You could just wait and have George communicate some additional from the meeting to Janine, who could then bring them to the next meeting and you could decide whether
Right,
to
certainly.
amend the minutes that way.
Certainly.
If you don't take a vote tonight, they're still open. Okay, so that if you did take a vote tonight.
Well, since we know that there's issue with it, I would say that we could just let it go till next month and let George.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm fine with
Yes, okay.
Okay, so I'm just gonna take away that we.
That we did not
discussed it.
approve the.
It was the
minutes
7th.
For
is
the
when we had
7th.
that.
The
The 7th is when we
There's a
had
motion,
that
a
meeting.
second, and never voted upon it.
Right. Okay,
In section B here might be what George is wanting to comment further on.
well, he can add his
Yeah, he'll have some
comments
dedicated
to.
comments,
to
yeah.
Jim.
That's exactly it. I mean, there's comments about the attorney who's not even a member of the board, but there's nothing that reflects important discussions that we had. So I just think they need to be in there and I'll produce that.
Okay,
Perfect.
So
So,
now, July 7th,
now July
I'm sorry, July
14th,
14th. you-
right.
You got a motion and a second, I believe. or
That's
did you?
correct.
Okay, so now, what are the ayes and on that? Any ayes? Yes, anybody? And any nays? No nays, so that. motion
And
carries.
Lou was the only one that needed to recuse himself. He's not
It
here.
wasn't.
Okay,
So the minutes for the 14th are approved.
That's right.
perfect.
Okay. All right. We had some correspondence, the adoption of the Somerset County Preservation Plan. That was correspondence from the county. Want me to do anything further with that, Tom?
No,
I think that's
she's
just,
telling you that these were
yeah,
submitted, that you don't have to do anything.
okay.
No resolutions, no completeness.
Oh, no, we have a letter from the attorney representing Goldman.
nothing.
Their application, they wanted to postpone till October 6th. So I think we need to say that no further notice. Is that correct, Tom?
Yes, it is. If they did notice, I think they did.
They did, didn't they, Janine?
Yes, they had
Yeah.
noticed originally for the July meeting and then postponed to this, and now they're postponing again.
Right.
Okay, so we'll just make a clear announcement that the Goldman application is being carried at the request of the applicant to October 6th,
Yeah.
2022 at 7 PM. There'll be no further notice on the Goldman application. You don't have to take the vote. Then, Madam Chairman, do you have something else? that you- No, don't think you have to take any action. Other than start the hearing.
No, I think that's it. We can now go to our hearing at AT&T Services. We're ready.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
Take care, George.
Thanks, George.
Thought maybe we had a 7th
No.
member is eligible, who's not eligible.
Yeah,
No.
Yes, he's ineligible and as was
As Lou,
Lou.
the two are within the 200 feet
They have
notice.
property on the 200 feet list and therefore are refused.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Glenn Pantel. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Bay Reed Drinker, Biddle and Reed. We represent, of course, AT&T Services, Inc. on this application for site plan and variance approval for the, in connection with the planned occupancy by AT&T of the existing and currently totally vacant 233,591 square foot 3-story building located, of course, at 1405-1455 Route 206, also known as Block 41, Lot 16.02. That's acreage on that lot is approximately 27 acres. The site also utilizes a drainage facility on Block 41, Lot 16.05, but there are no drainage improvements proposed in connection with the project, and in fact, zero increase in any impervious coverage associated with the development. What really has triggered our being before the board is that in connection with AT&T's planned move into this office complex, it requires the installation of what's called a block building. It's an accessory structure in connection with their on research activities that will be undertaken inside the building. Essentially, they have a computer lab and they test different software on and how that works on different cell phone applications and the like. So this block building actually will be relocated from their existing facility in Bedminster to this location. We put it in a location which we feel is the least intrusive and workable location on the site. That the location of the building entails, as you saw in the application, a side yard setback variance to allow a setback of 68 feet versus 75 being required under your ordinance. And in connection with that, there's only a single 20-foot called lattice tower that emits a radio signal, which is used in connection with their lab testing. And as you'll hear from our engineer, Mr. Kennedy, that the range of that antenna on that lattice tower is all of 100 feet.
How much?
100, only 100 feet with a 120-degree cone of influence, essentially 1/3 of a circle.
Were you talking about what's being emitted by this? There's no noise, it's just a frequency.
Correct. It's just, that's the design standard for the emission of the signal from this antenna. There's no noise associated with it whatsoever. Typical cell tower, on the other hand, can have a range, as I'm sure most people know, of a few miles. This is 100 feet with a 120-degree cone of influence. In no way, shape, or form is it part of the public cellular telephone network, such as you have with cell towers or roof-mounted antennas or co-located antennas on water towers and things like that. This is purely for experimental purposes, having a range of only 100 feet with a cone of influence of 1/3 of a circle. And the plans actually showed for that facility a setback of 47 feet, but we did a little further tweaking of the plans shortly before the hearing tonight. And you'll see on the exhibit that we're proposing that we're able to relocate it to a better location, still in the immediate vicinity of where it was proposed previously, but on the same alignment with the building. So it too will be proposed now to have a setback of 68, not 47 feet, versus the same required 75-foot setback for an accessory structure. Then lastly, there's a variance, also very de minimis, to permit 1,027 parking spaces. We're eliminating 5 parking spaces to put in this facility. So we're seeking to permit 1,027, whereas the 1,040 are required. And you'll hear a testimony is that we anticipate the daily occupancy of this building would be about 500 to 600 employees maximum is what's expected. There's a lot of flex time going on now for this building. So it's a world of difference in terms of the expected occupancy of this building today versus what it would have been even 5 years ago, and certainly 20 or 30 years ago when this building was initially approved. So again, we feel it's de minimis relief, but obviously if it's technically a variance, it's a variance. So we're addressing that as well. We have with us tonight Ron Kennedy, our land planner and engineer. He's licensed as a land planner in New Jersey and a site civil engineer. Excuse me, let me shut this. And he will be testifying as to the basic site layout, engineering, as well as the criteria for the grant of these variants. As I said, the AT&T is anticipated, has a signed lease on the property. Its occupancy, though, hinges on the approval of this facility, which is before you tonight. It's very important for AT&T. And frankly, their occupancy doesn't happen unless this facility is approved. That's how the lease is set up, because it's an important part of the research that they carry out in the building. The building will also house a call center addressing potential fraud complaints that customers might have regarding internet service and cell service and that sort of thing, as well as regular customer service being serviced in the call center. There would be there's administrative office uses, of course, for what you would expect for AT&T real estate legal, corporate, et cetera, and computer research lab. The facility also houses certain existing amenities which AT&T looks forward to using, such as existing cafeteria, existing fitness center. They'll provide laptop repair services for just their employees, of course. This is no retail activity and no retail service is going to be taking place in the building. Property is in, as I should have said at the outset, the OR office research zone. So the use of office with some research component obviously is allowed under the ordinance. I think that is also important to bear in mind in connection with the variances that we're seeking, because those variances support those permitted uses. Interestingly enough, with respect to the FAR variance, after the building was built.
Excuse me, sir, you keep saying building singular. It's two buildings,
Two
correct?
buildings. Yes, of course.
Technically, it's one because the variance was to combine them together with a common atrium. So it really is only one building.
Right. I was about to say that, but we don't need
Okay.
to quibble about it. But it's two buildings connected by the walkway, or if you will, one building. The three-story building apparently has some parking underneath as well. And the point I was about to make a second ago is that when that walkway was put in, at that time, apparently was obviously after the original approvals. By that time, when the building was originally built, no FAR variances were required. It was approved by planning board. After that occurred, the ordinance was changed to reduce the FAR. It's now 0.125 permitted. The building is right now at 0.2335. And there was a variance when that walkway was approved to go to the 0.2335. And the zoning board found, of course, at that time that there was no substantial detriment to the public good and no impairment of the zone plan and zone ordinance by allowing that walkway, which resulted in an FAR of 0.2335. We're now proposing to go with this 350 square foot addition to 0.2336. So it's 1/10,000th an addition of floor area on the site. So it truly is de minimis, and we would respectfully submit that if there was no substantial impairment of the zone plan and zoning ordinance and no detriment to the public good by going to 0.2335, that we think the same would hold true. We're now going by adding 1/1000th to go to 0.2336. So unless there's any questions for me at this time, what I'd like to do is proceed with testimony from Mr. Kennedy.
Will you have an electrical engineer here, or is it just going to be the two of you just to discuss the tower and what's coming out of that? And or if you know about that, that's fine. I just,
Yes, Mr. Kennedy has been given information by AT&T as to what those specs are. We also do have an electrical engineer if there's any more detailed questions that do come up.
with you tonight?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we'll swear in Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do,
And Mr. Kennedy, please state your name, spell your last name, and give us an address.
certainly. Ronald Kennedy, Kennedy, 265 Main Street in Gladstone.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, and we'll just confirm for the record that the board recognizes and accepts the qualifications of Ron Kennedy as a professional engineer and professional planner. Please go ahead, gentlemen.
Thanks.
So you're saying his qualifications are set? that
Yeah,
he
yeah.
is-
But if you want to present anything, you may, but you don't have to.
No, that's fine. Thank you. As long as he's accepted as an expert in the field of engineering and land planning, we're fine with that.
Good evening. And before I begin, I just want to make sure I can get on and put the exhibits up here.
Yeah, it's already.
It's ready?
shared.
Excellent. Okay. Good evening. For the record, the first exhibit I'm going to show, and Tom, do you want me to do each one, I assume? Put in,
Well, yes, why don't you do it?
okay, good.
Yeah.
So I have a total of 5 exhibits. So this is the first one.
They're not the plans themselves, they're new exhibits.
They are, and I do have 11 by 17 copies of those too for the board administrator at the end of the hearing. you can have that for the record. So the first exhibit I have
I'm
up.
sorry, Ron. If anyone in the public would be interested in sitting closer to the screen, you're welcome to move and please feel free to. But you don't have to. Okay, go ahead.
This didn't reset, but the first exhibit I have up is called Overall Aerial Exhibit. Today's date of August 11th, 2022. And again, it's an aerial exhibit of the neighborhood. Outlined in yellow is the actual property itself.
So let's call that out as Exhibit A1. if We could, and I can actually mark a copy, hard copy for you. Would that help?
That would, thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
So just as the exhibit, north is directly up. On the right side of the property is Route 202, 206. On the top part, center of the sheet is the intersection of 202, 206 and Lamington Road. On the left side or west of the property is Clucas Brook Road. And then to the rear of the property or the south part of the property is the rear of these lots on the southern port that face Thosmore Road. So the block itself is Lamington Road, 202, 206 to the right, Thosmore on the lower side of the sheet, and then on the left or west side is Clucas Brook Road. Property has only a single access for the patrons, the employees, and it is to the traffic light that is on 202, 206, a couple thousand foot south of Lamington Road. There's also a small emergency access that has limited access to Clucas Brook Road that was constructed when the original project was built in the mid-'80s. It was originally built as the Samus development that was part of just an office building that had a series of different users. It's 233,000 square foot. Excuse me, 3-story building. There is some parking underneath both sections of the building. And as was stated before, it is connected by this single story that was done for pharmacy probably about 15 years ago. The property is in the OR zone, office research zone. It is block 41, lot 16.02. It's 26.249 acres. On the whole property and the area around it, there's no wetlands, state open water, steep slopes, riparian buffers, a pretty clean, I'll say, piece of the property from an environmental constraints standpoint. The property has parking of 1,032 parking spaces. Again, primarily surface. There is some limited parking underneath the building itself. AT&T proposes to move into the building or the combined two buildings. As stated by Mr. Pantel, about 500 plus employees are expected to be on an attendance to the building itself. The amenities.
On any given day.
On any given day, correct. Certainly with 1,000 parking spaces, more than ample enough parking. There are amenities that exist in the building, the cafeteria, the fitness center. It is basically moving their operation from what I call the Long Lines facility, but the AT&T Long Lines facility that sits down the street a little bit on the Raritan River that was built in 1974. It's basically vacating that property and moving into this piece of property. That's the general intent. Besides the staff that's moving over, the one remnant that we're talking about moving is this block building. And I'll go into details. I have photos of it. So there's a lot of details that we'll get into, and the antenna that's associated with that. So it's part of the research that they've done and been using. Actually, we came before this board approximately 15 years ago and got that building approved because it got moved from Florham Park to the Bedminster campus about 15 years ago. And this board, the planning board, approved the site plan for that to go, this building that we're talking about moving to this part of the property or this property was approved by this board to go over to the Bedminster Long Lines campus. Same building, we're picking it back up again. It's basically a large shipping container box, and we're picking that back up that has specialized equipment in it and moving it over to this location. So the application itself, what we're asking for this board approval tonight is to pick that box up and move it over here. It's approximately 11 foot, 8 inches wide, 30 foot long. That's the size, dimensions of the box. It's 9 foot high, and it's like a shipping container. And it has a little better texture, and I'm going to show some images of it. It will sit in a parking area that is on this property that we feel is the best location for it to be on the property, both for AT&T and still protecting the residents with some of the existing berming and landscaping features that were part of this original approval for the Samus building back in the late 90s when that was approved. Again, the building is 350 square foot. You're going to see some photos that it has doors on either end for gaining access to it. Inside, there's radios and equipment, a desk, computers for the R&D purposes. It is only occupied when they're actually doing testing, only occupied when they're doing testing. So it's not something that someone sits in there all day long. At the max, it's used a few hours a week, but not every week. So it goes in between cycles of when they're taking certain equipment and testing that in certain frequencies. You'll see on the plan when I get into it a little more, the distances to the property lines and what we're asking for relief. And then there's the tower itself that's 20 foot high. It's just a lattice tower. It's a very simple structure itself, and it's only 20 foot high. And again, it's getting near the building. And the intent of that is there's antennas on that building that project out. And I'll show you some graphics of what that is. It's 20 foot high. We have it up against an existing tree line. So it shields from any exposure to any of the neighborhood or the general public on 202, 206. It is, again, a system of these two components, and I'm going to pull up Exhibit 2. Get to this thing.
Ron, can you describe the nature of this research without revealing any trade secrets or anything?
I mean, oversimple, it's cell service. It really is. It's very low volume though. So the oversimplification, it will be putting out less than what your phone puts out because it's such a short distance. And the area that it's testing is from the tower and it literally goes out 100 feet. That's the range of it in this 120-degree radius of the area. And all it is doing is testing different systems that AT&T is using either for the phone or the broadband systems or 5G or all the different elements. And they change that equipment around and experiment with it. It's lab space, but it literally is supposed to be a very isolated micro area that is outside of this antenna and the buildings right next to it.
Does the communicator interact with any spaces within the building?
No.
It's really a
No.
standalone kind of thing.
Well, it goes to the antenna and then it obviously goes to computer systems that go back into the building, to do analysis. But I'll say the waves itself is from the antenna to 100 foot away at a max. And it really is supposed to be just a very small isolated area that they have on the piece of property, but it's near where the engineers are, in the building. And there's one or two that may go out into the structure to physically see what is, the equipment that they're testing.
Right, and they often may use different software applications in the equipment and test the effect of different software as it's been explained.
So Exhibit 2, we'll call it accessory.
All of that area, the influence you talked about, that phone is on property.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
None of it goes off.
No. And I'll have an exhibit that shows that range, Frank, of exactly where it goes. So Exhibit 2 is accessory research structure, and it's photo exhibit 1. Photo exhibit 1, same date, today's date, August 11th, 2022.
Well, no, excuse me, I thought A2 was,
No, I'm going to use this as
Oh,
A2 because the questions are there. So
okay,
the two panels on the left are just two angles of the existing building itself that exists in Bedminster over at the Long Lines facility. And as you can see is the physical building, it's 11 and change wide. It has two doors on one end, one door on the other end. It's primarily a stucco type of finish that's associated, a flat roof that's only 9 foot high. There is a air conditioner unit or heating unit on either end. It has one window on it. It has a jelly jar light or small light over each. There is a floodlight that's on this building. Because of where it's located, we're going to remove that. We don't need it. There's plenty of lighting that's in the parking lot lighting itself, but where it was on the AT&T campus, the Long Lines campus, they needed it. So just because of where this is going to be, we are going to remove that. I'll call it a floodlight on the building, and it'll just have a simple light on either doorway as required by code. The panel on the right in this exhibit just shows a simple picture inside. That's all it is. And some racking of some computer equipment. that they're testing. And there's a seat there that someone would sit during some of the testing for, it could be a couple hours a week that they could sit in there and do that. If I can blow this up and if it works correctly.
And
What
this
you
is-
see behind this is, I'll say, the tower or the lattice. And that is a total of 20 foot high. And you can see on the top of that, there's just two antennas, like you would see at a restaurant, that would be giving off Wi-Fi, type of thing. And that's what's actually, those boxes, if you want to call it that, is what you would see at a commercial establishment that's throwing some type of signal, a Wi-Fi type of signal off of it.
That's
there's
20
two
foot
here.
high? That's 20 foot?
That is 20 foot high, just the
Looks less
perspective.
than double the height of.
It's.
Yeah, well, it's two things.
Right.
It falls away elevation wise, Tim.
Yeah.
It falls back and it's a perspective,
Okay.
of the photo, but it is,
Okay.
we've measured it, it's 20 foot high,
How high is the building?
9. Okay, so the
And this
building
sits
itself is
on a-
9 foot high.
This sits on a concrete pad that's,
Th-
Or
th-
it's
This will,
foundation.
they're gonna put it right on the asphalt's in pretty good shape there. We're gonna put it right on the asphalt. It's it's structure by itself, so
Mhm.
it
it
doesn't
doesn't
need
need a
its own
foundation.
base or foundation to it. So the notion is there. I'll say the lattice itself, you can see there's a concrete base to that.
Yeah.
So that'll
I see
have
that.
a concrete base, like you would see a light pole, it would have a concrete base to it. And as I said, the inside, I'll say it's pretty simple, what we would see as a server room that anyone would have in any of our offices. There's nothing it's all about the testing of that certain types of newer technology that they're working with. The next exhibit that we'll go to is the actual site plan itself.
This literally would be picked up with straps, put on a flatbed,
Yeah.
driven to the site.
Yep. And you can even see on that exhibit, Rich, there's hooks already there, that you
Yeah.
can, that it was lifted up, when it was put in there. So it's probably 4 turnbuckle hooks and goes up on a crane and gets dropped back down. So this is exhibit A3. It's our site plan rendering. And comparing that to our exhibit A1, it's in the lower left corner. So it's in the southwest corner of the property. Today's date too, same. But you'll see the south building corner of it on the upper part of the exhibit. You'll see Clucas Brook Road on the left. My pointer is where the emergency access goes into the parking lot. And where this is being proposed, the structure itself, the box itself, is in about 3 parking spaces. And it's right up against the curb line of those parking spaces. So the proposal is to drop that in the parking lot. It would take up about 3 spaces plus the door on each side. So we're really talking about the removal of 5 spaces when those doors swing open that we would be removing from this. It's about 150 foot away from the building. And right now, the closest point of the structure itself to the property line is 68 feet. Okay, 68 foot to the property line. I'm going to blow this up a little. Our original plan had the lattice tower in this left location here, about 25 foot away from the building. When
And
we,
about 47 feet from the property line.
47 foot from the property line. When we talked to the folks at AT&T, as they were looking at some of this detail, we realized that we can actually move that to one of the islands where we're proposing it now to be shown. So instead, in place of the location that we showed on the site plan, which was 47 foot, we're now would like to propose the tower to be in this island. And then it would be the same distance as the building, 68 foot from the property line that would be there. And in that case, then we don't have to go behind a tree line that's there already. And you'll see, I have photos of it. It's a nice tree line. And candidly, the board at the time spent a lot of time in landscaping. We didn't do the site engineering. I'm sure your professionals were involved in it. If any of you go out there today, it's a really good example of how landscaping and berming can work well 20 years later, 25 years later. And I have photos of here, but some of them look ratty after a certain amount of time. This looks pretty good. So the board did a good job with berming and plant material that they put in there. And I think so, compared to other sites that we see after 25 years not being affected.
So the number on that dimension line there is 68? feet?
68 from the building to this location here, 68 foot.
Ron, did you notice in that double row, nice, as you mentioned, that mature double row of evergreens?
Yeah.
The only dead tree is not next to where
Yes.
We need a replacement.
So we're proposing, again, it's a 75-foot setback for an accessory structure. Just by virtue of the fact of these parking spaces and where we want to show it, it's a slight deviation to 68 feet. And then again, we're going to move the tower up to that same dimension of 68 foot from the property line in lieu of the 47 feet. The only other real work is there'd be one trench that would have electric and, cabling and things that would go from the building to this location. There's no additional real efforts that need to be made for anything out. There's no utilities, there's no bathroom. It would just be electricity and some fiber optic lines and cable lines that would run back and forth between the two. We are losing those 5 spaces, but again, the site is very well parked, and certainly for the intended use of AT&T, even at peak, they feel very comfortable that the loss of those 5 spaces are not going to be an issue.
Right. Could you elaborate just a bit on the employee count? Because we talked about maximum of 500 being expected generally on any given day. But I understand that there's some 2,000 actually technically assigned
Yes.
to the building, but there's just a huge commitment to flex time and telecommuting that they expect less than 500, about 500 maximum per day.
Yes.
And how does that work in terms of office space? Or people have their own offices, or a lot of people
No.
will be assigned office space on a daily basis when they happen to
It
arrive
is.
on their assigned day?
Just like the hoteling that started a while, COVID changed the world, and no one's going to have their name on top of an office anymore, and there'll be just communal spaces that'll be out. This property was already restacked a number of years ago when Malincroft moved in there, so it's actually very updated, that building. And Malincroft left early in their lease, and it's in very good shape, and not a lot of work needs to be done inside this building. So it's already set up for that type of operation. So it's not like other older office buildings that would have to be restacked. It's ready, it's move-in ready. Yeah. Yeah, bring the flowers in and you're ready to go here. There's not a lot of work that needs to be done. Technology's up to date. There's a lot of stuff that's up to date. I'm sure there's AT&T standards that they're going to have to do inside the building. But for the most part, from a usability standpoint, it's pretty ready to go and move.
Such as, for instance, the cafeteria and exercise facilities?
It's all, the fitness is new. It's all,
So
ready. to-
we're not here about that. We're just here about this one little building.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it goes back to, we need a relief from the parking. So I think that the part of that, Tim, that's important is how we're using the building becomes important, because for losing those 5 parking spaces, we need a variance for that. And we're just trying to show that we feel very comfortable that with the 500 employee count, that on a max basis, there's more than adequate parking here if losing those 5 spaces.
But you're saying 2,000 people might be assigned to this location. But as you're saying, Ron, there's not 2,000 workstations in this space
That
by
will not
any
happen.
means.
No, no way.
Okay,
Yeah.
so is there closer to 500 workstations, or is there closer to 1,000 workstations?
No, it's going to be a max of 500.
So
Yeah, they're
even
not,
at a quarterly sales meeting or whatever, there's only going to be 500 people there at any particular time.
Yeah, I suppose it's possible you could have a little bit more of whatever on a given day, but generally it's the target we have been told is absolutely 500 max.
So you're not going to use any more than half of the parking capacity.
Right.
at present.
That would be.
I have a very basic question. Why can't the things that are going on inside that building be done inside the building that's there at this point?
it's that tower sending signals back out to a location. You'd have to go retrofit the whole building. It's already built. It's already there. All that technology is already into that building itself. So the whole notion here is why they took it from Florham Park and brought it over to Bedminster, and now Bedminster to another site in Bedminster. It's all prepackaged and everything it's doing. So
And
there's technology that they have and they continue to test. And
And the testing, excuse me, has to take place on the outside.
yes, it does. It has to be an exterior type of test that's
And
going on in there,
because
not in the building and the
has all
interference
technology
of
in
the
it.
building.
Okay.
And like anything else, there has to be consistency with testing. This isn't something, long-term testing that's there. So there's a lot of base work that's set up in it already in that computer room. And then they add new, not systems, but new technology that they're experimenting with. They still need to keep that base testing that they have going. So I think that there's some consistency they're worried about too, of if I just go take it and get rid of the building, why would I go do that? I mean, it costs more money probably to pick this up and move it than just go and take in a small room and put in a couple computers. And there's very specific testing systems that they're using within this building.
And they couldn't put that building closer to the existing building, like on the grass over there, and they'd have less of a trench to make?
They could, but again, let me use this exhibit and talk about
Okay,
the cone and what we're doing. So this is this would be A4. Okay, and it's site plan rendering radio frequency fan, FAN, radio frequency fan. And again, the fan is this is where we're going away from the property in the 120 degrees. And this is the fan area that you have for this going away.
Well, you say, for the record, when you say away from the property line.
Away from in both property lines, to the south, it's Bosmore, and then to the west from Clucas Brook, it's going back towards the building. And then they would put a device that will be in a car, a vehicle, that would be out here that would measure that, because that's how we drive, that's how we're moving around. So there would be a car out here that would say, okay, well, if I'm sending out that to this car in such a micro space, that's where it would go. And the notion here is have it go away from the property lines as opposed to the opposite, where the building would be up in the parking lot here and then going back towards the property line. The notion was just, push it away from property lines. We thought that was a better choice in things. And what you also see too, when I show you the last exhibit, is it fits well into the space when you see how it fits into the landscape here. And let me just introduce that last exhibit.
Well, while you're doing that, I think part of the board's question would be, if there's nothing that constrains you from putting it at a conforming location away from the property line, what is there about this location that makes it preferable for both AT&T and essentially everybody affected by it?
Yeah, I think, and you'll see on this last exhibit, the benefit. My pretty trees. Okay. The benefit, when I look at this exhibit, which is called Accessory Research Structure Photo Exhibit 2, again, today's date.
A5. A5, correct?
A5. And I have three views. This view, one upper left, is standing towards Clucas Brook in the parking lot and looking towards Route 202, 206 out, or 206 out in the distance behind this tree. The building itself is on the left and the property line, the southern property line, is on the right. And when you look at this photo, I'll zoom in a little. Where we're talking about putting this structure is right in this location where my pointer is now, and you can see the island behind it.
Where is it?
The location would be to the shadow line against this tree line, along the curb line. You'll see the island just beyond it.
Your pointer's frozen. Your pointer's frozen.
How's that?
There you
I
go.
know, sorry. All right, again, I'll go back to right side is the south, towards the south property line. Here's the existing tree line. Left of the side is the building itself. Straight ahead is 206. The area of the structure we're talking about here is where my pointer is now, along the curb line. And you'll see that there's a berm about 5 foot higher. You'll see these significant trees. Beyond these trees is a significant evergreen screening. And then there's another, again, from the curb line to the property line is about 68 feet until you get to the property line. So in our view, it's sunken down, right? And it's up against a tree line. And it's kind of, I'll say, even if on 206, it's hidden, it's not there. If I had it in the middle of the
tower is
parking
going
lot.
to be on the
and it's-
same level
it's
as
lower.
the building. The tower will be on the same level as
Yes,
the building.
in this
It will be
island
on-
here, and it's only 20 foot high. And I measured these trees, they're about 40 foot
No,
high,
the island is only like 6 inches.
6 inches.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a typical curb line,
Okay.
just 6 inches up. And there's no trees that are in the island,
How high are the trees there?
about 40 foot.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so again,
Yeah.
it would go about half that height of that tree line. And it's an open lattice. It's not a big bright, it doesn't have lights on it. There's no lights on there. You got a light on the building that's just literally what you would have outside of a house light that you would have on there from a security standpoint.
There's no noise. This doesn't generate any noise.
It does not.
Is that light going to be on all the time? The little light? It's probably what is it like
It's just a code
Yeah, just
requirement to have that on there. And there's parking lot lights in here anyway,
Gotcha.
you know, that are there. And if the board has a concern about it, I don't know if code wise we can shut it off. It's not a big deal to have it
Small light.
there. But when we looked around this site, everywhere on this site, you know, front yard, in more the back of the building, it seemed like it was the lowest on the property. You had this great berm that was here, and I want to show another exhibit. Let me just get all three in, so it's important. This is view 2 is on Clucas Brook Road. Right, and this is a view on the right panel of this. My pointer showing? Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where the emergency access road is, to
Yeah.
cut through. So in this case, there is a berm 6 to 8 foot high.
Yeah.
There is vegetation above that berm that's deciduous and evergreen vegetation. And, you know, he's driving up and down, you're not going to see it. It's hidden, it's down lower, you know, into that space. So I think it's quite shielded from Clucas Brook, that the visual aspect of it.
Good
And,
thing
you know,
is it might be the ugliest building I've ever seen.
what's that building?
I say, good thing it's concealed because it might be the ugliest building I've ever seen.
And then lastly, the photo here, this is exhibit.
Water will get you everywhere.
You know, the engineers aren't happy back there.
They don't care about you.
The building itself, so this is standing up against the loading dock and again, looking almost directly south. And yeah, that's the island we're talking about. The building itself would be right in the center of this photo. You can see the berm behind it. You can see the really nice screening that's behind there that was built when the building was built or planted when the building was built. There's an evergreen row that's pretty consistent behind that. And again, if you drive around the site, you say, this is a good place. It's it's hidden from everywhere there as opposed to the middle of the site or in the front of the site or, you know, again, the deviation we're talking about is 68 versus 75 feet. And it's such a small building. It's a pretty innocuous building, even though when Rich says it's not going to win any architectural awards. I get that. So we think with these photos are showing the board that it is a decent location when we look at the alternatives of the property for what it's performing, its needs that needed to hear, and I'll say the best choice that gives the benefit to the public. View sheds on 206, protection to the neighbors to the south and to the west from Clucas Brook. It's pointing I'll say the antenna in the right direction, even though it's very low frequency and it's less than a phone. So it's not like it's not a cell tower type of aspect. It's a very, very low frequencies or low power that's being emitted from anything here that's only going 100 foot. It's not what our cell phone has to travel 2 miles sometimes to get to a tower. This is not like that. This is a very, very slow
Right,
distance.
and
there.
in fact, as AT&T advised that your cell phone max emission could be 2,000 to 3,000 watts.
Yes,
Right, and that this would be, on the other hand, 2 to 10 milliwatts, 2 to 10 thousandths of a watt. So even if you took the high end of it at 10 milliwatts and compared that to the 3,000 milliwatts, the 3,000 milliwatts from your phone would be 300 times stronger than what comes from this facility. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, so what you're saying is, what it's being admitted is not harmful.
Correct.
And it's not on all the time. It's only going to be on maybe once a week at the most.
Once a week for 2 hours.
Okay, and it's pointing in an area away from the homes.
Yep.
Yes.
And just a couple really simple things. Yeah, it's only for itself. It doesn't go out to, no one can pick up that signal. You're not going to go by, it's not going to show up as a Wi-Fi signal. You can't pick up, it's not open to any public or anything.
Even if you're in the parking lot with your cell phone on, you're not going to be
Okay.
fed from that signal.
Mr. Pantel, I have tremendous respect for Mr. Kennedy, his abilities as an engineer, and all the other things he's good at. Maybe invoke a little need for some different kind of expert testimony when we just rattle off all those things.
Sure, we can do that. It's
I
not a
think a
problem.
lot.
Yes, absolutely, because as I indicated at the outset, we do have an electrical engineer who can confirm that. We don't want to get into the weeds, but we absolutely do
He's
have.
great
electrical.
at what he does.
Yes, understood. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll come back to that. Well, in fact,
Ron,
if you'd
Why
like
don't you
to
do
do
that
that now, we can
Are
we
you
can do that
completing
right
the, I'd
now.
like to open it up to the public for any of their questions for Ron.
Well, what I don't want to, this is not concluding Mr. Kennedy's testimony, but if you have questions regarding
This is the
radio
engineering.
signal, have an electric engineer. who
I
can-
understand. We're not going to have engineering, electrical questions. We'll just have what he's testified for.
I think Frank was asking.
Well, I thought Frank was.
No, what I was saying was Ron was talking about some technical details, and for the record,
Mhm.
for the credibility of the testimony to you,
Mhm.
they had an expert in that field here to testify.
Right, I understand.
And I just said probably they want to get that.
Well, you want to do that before we open it up to the public for Ron?
Yes, I would like to, because
Ron's
what
done.
I'd like to
Ron's not
do if
done.
we could.
I don't think Ron, are you done?
Ron?
No.
I haven't done the
No.
planning side of things. That's
No.
the,
Well,
that's the
that's the other
engineering
side of
side,
it.
but I need
I
to do the planning
Yeah,
understand.
side.
I was
exactly.
gonna
And
have
It's-
you,
As a
yeah,
planner, he's got to go last.
I understand.
Exactly.
He's heard that in the testimony.
Yeah, okay. So you want to do the electrical engineer first?
Yeah, exactly. I think we'd
Okay.
like to do that.
Okay, and then we'll
we
come back
can
to
open
Mr.
Him up to the public, if that's okay with you,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Mhm.
And then we go back to Ron to conclude his testimony, including his planning testimony, because as Mr.
Mhm.
Banish just said, the planning testimony should take into account all of the testimony.
I
Ron's
understand.
engineering testimony, as well as
Mhm.
what you'll hear from our electric engineer. That's why
Okay.
we brought him here tonight in case you had questions, so no
Mhm.
problem.
Okay. Let's bring the next
So I'd like
expert.
to have Mr. Murray come forward.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And please state your name and address and spell your last name.
John Murray, Murray. I live at 29 West Glen Road, Denver, New Jersey. 783.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr.
so
Murray.
for the record, Mr. Murray, would you please describe your background and your nature of your involvement in this project, and specifically, of course, in the engineering and testing that we alluded to a few minutes ago?
So I have
Is that microphone working?
Yes, if you could stand closer to it, but I did just put new batteries in it. It
How's
should
that?
be.
Any better?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, well, normally my voice moves well enough as it is.
All right.
So I have a degree in electrical engineering technology from Trenton State. I worked at AT&T for 27 years. Prior to that, I was responsible for designing and manufacturing of RF powered measurement equipment at Loop Electronics. And prior to that, I was at RCA Astro, which is the satellite division of RCA. So I've been working in the RF field for many years. But my role at AT&T is I'm an AVP, Assistant Vice President in AT&T Labs Technologies. And I am responsible for the people who operate this facility.
Including specifically this research facility that we've just been describing.
This piece of the facility, obviously, there's other managers that cover other parts of the business.
Okay. Okay, so we would ask that Mr. Murray's testimony be admitted as an expert in the field of electric engineering, dealing with this facility.
Yes, the board will recognize and accept Mr. Murray's qualifications as an electrical engineer. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. So you heard a little bit of comment from me and testimony from Mr. Kennedy regarding the emissions from the antenna, and compare that to cell phone. Could you please comment on that? And if you concur with that, please confirm.
So the purpose of the facility is to do forward-looking work on things that we may eventually put into the network. The facility does not need to transmit at very high power, so we consider it a low-power facility, and we abide by all FCC regulations and everything that we do. That's it. Typically, as described, we're only looking to cover roughly 100 feet. 100 feet, though we use some of the protocols and some of the frequencies that are associated with cellular communications, we could also use unlicensed spectrum based on the FCC requirements. So we don't need to transmit at very high levels. Typically, we're transmitting at levels lower than a cell phone would transmit in the cellular system, or comparable to what you would expect to see out of a Wi-Fi access point that most people have in their home. Similar frequency ranges, not exactly the same. The unlicensed spectrum are often the same that would be used in a Wi-Fi access point because they operate in unlicensed spectrum. And then we use the antennas and work on the protocols over these links. And so we need you see there's multiple antennas there. you need to work, be able to have enough distance so that you can see the multiple antennas across a little bit of a range. Inside a building, there's too much clutter and other obstacles that would prevent that capability from being repetitive and usable within the environment.
Okay.
We typically monitor all of these equipment. There are usually actual physical attenuators that are put in place, so it's not even, can't be programmed to be the maximum power that you can put out on some of the systems, because we actually have physical controls in place that would prevent a person actually accidentally raising the power levels. But the equipment doesn't work above power levels that the FCC regulates anyhow in these businesses. This is all commercial gear. The gear is not designed by us. It's designed by our vendors and operated by us.
Okay, and you heard that testimony previously indicating that the cone of influence, if you will, emanating from the antenna is 100, has a 120-degree cone of influence, so essentially 1/3 of a circle, as you saw depicted on one of the
Most
exhibits.
cellular systems have, traditionally a third of a circle. We're only interested in, one segment because we're interested in how the antennas work, comparing each other to each other in that one segment.
So-
We're not looking for coverage. We're not looking for distance. We're not looking for those kind of performance characteristics.
So it would be one 120-degree cone, if you will. Okay, and you heard as well, is it fair to say that that cell phone emission could be maximum of some 2,000 to 3,000
Well,
watts?
Right,
Could you
so,
comment on that?
milliwatts, right? So a
Well-
cell phone typically puts out somewhere between 3 to 5 watts maximum. It doesn't do that very often because that
Right.
will kill your battery pretty fast.
Right.
If someone walks around and the battery's going dead fast, that's because they're usually transmitting a lot of power out of the headset. So we don't need to do those levels because we're only at 100 feet. That's why it's more comparable to a Wi-Fi, that you're only doing those kind of distances out of the Wi-Fi kind of equipment. Similar kind of things. Even if you look at our antennas, they're typically smaller than any of the antennas you would see on the commercial facilities, because we don't need to handle those kind of powers of position.
Right, thank you. And just to correct something that I had stated earlier, that the cell phone emission maximum you're saying is like 2 to 3, maybe even 5 watts, not 2 to
Watts.
3,000.
Watts. Now,
2 to 3 watts.
thousands would be milliwatts. So we use different units of measure. Sometimes you'll
Okay.
hear watts. Sometimes you'll hear milliwatts, which is
Okay.
1,000 of it. Sometimes you'll hear DBM, which is the
Okay,
DBM scale
okay.
for power.
Okay, but just to be clear, because we got to keep it simple and
Yeah.
clear. 2 to 3 watts out of the cell
Cell
phone,
phone.
number one. From this antenna, it could be 2 to 10 milliwatts, which is 2 to 10 thousandths of a watt,
Correct.
right? So that 10 milliwatts, there's 100, a single watt would be 100 times stronger than 10 milliwatts,
Yes.
correct? So if you had 3 watts coming from a cell phone and 10 milliwatts coming from this facility, as you might have, correct? Then the cell phone would have about 300 times the strength of the signal of those 10 milliwatts, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to correct that. Thank you.
All right.
Anything else?
Anything else there? Sir?
Yeah, and-
Available for cross-examination, but so I think we're done.
I have a question.
Yeah, go right ahead, Rick.
So you said you're transmitting from this facility. The receivers would be you testing cell phones at 100 feet from this thing?
Different devices. Sometimes they're an IoT device. Sometimes they're a cell phone. Sometimes they're a piece of test equipment like a spectrum analyzer. So that there's different kinds of RF equipment that would receive.
So if you want to roll out the new application, new software, a new process, you test that from the parking lot 100 feet away or so.
But typically, we have special cell phones that have more access to the internal workings of the phone, so that we can look at the different signals coming from the different antennas. So you hear today that there's a lot of work going on in different channels, right? The government brings out new spectrum. Well, now the phone doesn't just work with one frequency like it did in the 900 megahertz range. It's got to work at 900 and 2.4 and things like that. So we work across those different frequencies
to make the experience more homogeneous. That's this purpose. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on board? Question? Okay, I think we can open it up to the public now for this witness. If you have any questions for him from the public.
Yeah, I guess I have one.
Oh, you want to come up and
Sir,
give
come up
us
to
your
the
name
mic
and your
and
address,
state your
please?
name and address.
Sure. So my name is James Statmuller, Stadtmuller. And I'm at 2300 Lamington Road, which is across the street from the library.
Mhm.
So what security concerns should you or we have about that building? Is there valuable stuff in there that will attract people who want to get in who aren't law enforcement?
It's, so it would be similar equipment used for radio communications, any cell tower base or anything like that has much more of it, obviously. But there is a small amount of equipment located in it. It does have locks on the doors, and we follow the normal AT&T, premise security. That's probably better addressed by one of the facilities people. But that's, it's not, it's pretty specialized. It's not something that anyone would take home and use in their house.
So you're saying there's not a significant black market for this sort of equipment?
No.
Anyone else?
Already have no interest in that.
No, because the equipment there is mostly the vendors supplied equipment that they could buy from the same vendors. It's how we put our protocols on top of it. The AT&T network is kind of unique in that way that we bring things that other cellular providers don't do. So we are, we have extended capabilities that we overlay on top of it. Things like security and other things like that.
Anyone else in the public? Want to check online, Janine?
So if anyone that is there would like to speak, you can either raise your hand or unmute yourself. Let us know that you have a question.
Did I misread, but do we have Jennifer Lopez on there?
Yeah, we do.
Wow.
Fresh from her wedding.
Wow, she made the time.
No one is making any indication that they have a question.
Okay, seeing no one else, then we'll close this part of the.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you
the
very
public,
much.
And we'll come back to Mr. Kennedy.
All right, so based on what you heard from me, just heard,
Mhm.
the application itself is in the OR zone. We're conforming, the use is conforming. There's no change to impervious coverage. We're not asking anything within the primary building itself. The combination of this blockhouse on it and the antenna causes three different variances. The first one is FAR variance from 13.406.4, 0.125 is required in the zone. As Mr. Pantel said in the original part of this hearing, is what it is today. And then with this new additional 351 square foot, it goes to 0.2336. So it's easy. 1,000 or 10,000 of a percentage point. The next deviation is the accessory building setback in the OR zone. This is same chapter, same chart, 13.406.4. 75 foot is required for an accessory structure or building. We're proposing both now at 60 foot. 47 foot for the tower, and we're proposing both at 60 feet. And the last thing, because we're putting it in the parking lot, not spreading the impervious coverage, we would need a parking variance from 13.401.2 D as a dog. 1,039 spaces are required. It currently has 1,032, and we'd be removing 5 spaces to 1,027. So we'd be a loss of those additional 5 spaces. For the D variance itself, it is a little unique in the D variance. It's a D4 variance as opposed to a use variance. The use is allowed. And the only deviation we have is the FAR, so that's the D4 criteria that we have of increasing of the FAR to 350 square foot. We know it's a minuscule increase compared to the 26 acres that this site is. And the relevance to the court cases in this is the Randolph Township Center case that talks specifically about a deviation from the floor area ratio. And it's not the DG case where the burden of proof. It really comes down to is the applicant must show simply that the site can accommodate the problems with the increase in the floor area ratio. The site can accommodate that increase in the floor area ratio. And I think with the testimony that you heard already, 350 square foot increasing volume of building there can be accommodated on this particular piece of property. And it's not something that I think it's going to be a big change to the look and feel of this property. If this was approved, if you drove by the site, it's still the same. It's not a little bit, it's a big deal.
Right, yeah, and in fact, you said this, you did correctly state that the Randolph Town Center case says that your special reason is shown by the site accommodating any quote unquote problems caused by the higher FAR. Given the circumstances of this case, do you think it's fair to say that there really are no problems that would be caused by it?
Correct. I'm saying problems caused by it. It's sitting off the side of the parking lot. It's up against some pretty significant buffers that have been created with the original application. And I just don't see any associated conflicts that you would have with that building. The second aspect that we have is the two C variances, and maybe C2 variances for both the accessory building setback and the parking variance itself. As we talked about, if you go out and drive to the site, drive around the site, to us, it's the right place for that location. Right? By the combination of the geography, of the elevations of the berm, the tree line that's there already, sitting in the parking lot off to the side. It's just the right place to put both of these structures as opposed to other locations that may be in conformance with 75 foot. We think it gets all the benefits that would have with 75 foot at the 60 because of burning, of landscaping, and other elements that were put effectively into this property with the original site plan approval back in the. And then lastly, the loss of those 5 spaces, we feel the site can clearly accommodate, be accommodated with the loss of the 5 spaces with the more than thousands of spaces that are on this property already. So when we look at C2 relief for this, that we don't see any substantial detriment to the public good, not impair the intent and purpose of the zoning plan. It's a de minimis deviation that we're talking about here. It's not increasing employee count. It's not increasing traffic to the site. It's not adding head count. It's just sitting off doing this thing from time to time in the corner of the property.
Yeah. And for the C2, of course, the applicant should show that the purposes of the municipal land use law would be advanced by a deviation and that the benefits of the deviation outweigh the detriment. So could you comment for a moment on the purposes of the municipal land use law that would be served by the grant of the variance?
Sure. There's a handful of them for this specific site and that's what we're asking for is the purposes of zoning A to encourage municipal action, providing the appropriate use development of lands in the state, promoting public health, safety, and general welfare. C provides adequate light, air, and open space. D is dog development to conflict with the development of general welfare of neighboring municipalities in the county or the state. I, promoting a desirable visual environment by placing the facility where it is shielded from the residents. And then N, coordinating the public and private procedures to lessen the cost of development, promote a more efficient use of the land, enabling reuse of the vacant facility.
As opposed to starting from scratch and developing a new site, for instance.
So, and again, from the negative criteria standpoint, I think it clearly protects the traveling public on 206. I feel strongly it protects the Flukersbrook neighborhood and any of those lots that are south of the property towards Stosmore. It fits well in that.
Right, so under the municipal land use law, the benefits of the deviation have to substantially outweigh any detriment, and are you seeing any material detriment here?
I know. There's some other aspects of this. There's a couple of comments that were brought up in Mr. Banish's letter.
Yes,
I do want to touch on lighting. There's really minimal lighting that we're talking about. We are going to use that floodlight that's on the building. And again, this would be just the smaller lights that are over the doors themselves. As we talked about with the landscaping, the existing landscape is very well done. It's in good condition right now. And we even moved the tower that protects that landscape. By not having to go up to that area, trenching and everything else. And the last comment that he had was just about the HVAC. It's just, there's those units that show the picture. The residential scale is a small building. It's not like it's a lot of energy for 350 square foot.
right, so it's essentially it's like a window unit that you might have in a house. It's nothing like
But small.
yes, but it's not like a rooftop facility that you'd have on top of a 200,000 foot office building.
That's what's, the main building itself.
Right.
Is a small square foot. So based on those, those comments and certainly the justification for the relief, we think that the board can approve this application for the demolition of these couple of minor elements associated with this proposed tower and the proposed blockhouse.
Right. Do you see any detriment to the surrounding residences?
I don't. I think they're, again, they didn't know it was there when it's after it's built. I don't think they notice it at all.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so I'd say that concludes Mr. Kennedy's testimony. And well, just to wrap up too, you had indicated that with respect to the variances, the C variances, there's no detriment to, there's no public detriment to the public general welfare and no impairment of the purposes of the zone plan and zone ordinance. Is that the same holds true for the FAR variance?
It is. Yeah, it's the same issue that, again, one driving by this site, one driving to the parking lot. It's not something that's going to change the character of what this property is. It's going to look very similar to what's there.
Okay, thank you. So I think that concludes Mr. Kennedy's testimony. We'll certainly be glad to have it open to the public and the board.
Anything more, Frank?
I think we'll hear from the public if there is any person.
Okay, I'll open it up to the public. If you have any questions for Mr. Kennedy. I'm going to check the board,
So again, if there's anyone that's online and you'd like to raise your hand or unmute yourself, you just need to be sworn in. Let us know that you have a question.
Madam Chair, I really don't need to question Rob because I pretty much agree with everything he said.
okay.
Pains me to say that. but-
Oh, I'm sure. You had to bring up something. You did bring up one tree there missing.
I think the important thing is, 6 months ago, this was an empty site and the likely reuse of it was going to be something other than an employment like this. The mayor, despite my suggestion that he explore some alternative use opportunities, was steadfast in saying, if we stick with this, we're going to get the right thing here. If you recall what we've been doing with the AT&T study and the types of uses we want in our technology and information cluster, this is one of those uses that we are not losing. We're just moving it off the street. So I think I certainly can recommend to you that you wholeheartedly accept the representation that the FAR increase is insignificant. The placement in the landscape is artful, really. The landscaping is over the top, except for that one dead tree which happens to be right. But you would never know because there's so much landscaping in between anyway. So this is one of those deals that took us an hour and a half to say something we could have said in 5 minutes. This is very good for veterans, and I think it's great for AT&T that they're continuing a tradition they started in 1974.
Yes, I think we're all very glad to have him stay in Bedminster. And,
Yeah.
Madam Chair, it looks like
Yes.
the court reporter has her hand raised.
Oh, okay.
I was just wondering if we could perhaps take that exhibit down so I could see the board members.
Sure.
Thank you.
Everybody smile now.
Thank you. You're lovely looking people.
Yes, is there any question? You see the board members and
I can see them. Thank you.
okay. We'll do it again, one more time, public, or any comment they might have.
You Testify the application.
Anybody? No?
The one that's raising your hand, you can unmute yourself if you're not sure how to raise your hand.
Okay, I think we can close it to the public. And I think we're ready.
Mr. Pentel, any further final words? I'm not saying you need any, but offering it.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Kennedy's testimony was very comprehensive. I'm not going to do a whole rehash of that. I actually had planned to go through the criteria for the variances, but I'm not going to do that. So you're welcome. But we do thank the board for the few good questions that you did have. Glad we had Mr. Murray to respond to a little bit more of the detail that you did ask for. And we appreciate your consideration and respectfully ask that the application be approved.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chairman, if the board is ready, you could consider a motion to approve the B and
Rich?
C variance.
Rich has a question, I
Okay.
think, there. Yeah,
I agree with Frank's statements. I don't have any problem with the application with respect to the variances that are necessary here. And it's a welcome scenario. But my understanding is that this is a long-term lease. And again, this building is horrible. I don't know how old it is. You've moved it already twice, but at the very least, I'd like to add a condition that this lumpcrete or aggregate exterior at least be cleaned, if not reclad. Because honestly, it can't be characterized as any sort of architecture the way it is. So my condition would be at least clean it, if not reclad it.
Okay, give me just a couple seconds.
How about clean?
I thought you were going to say it's dark siding.
it is in the district, right?
Yeah, we can definitely clean the facility. I think recladding is problematic because it's a concrete structure, but we can definitely clean that up and we'll do that. That's fine. Thank you.
Please. And maintain it regularly, so
Yes.
the dirt that accumulates inside those little pebbles doesn't make it look hideous.
Right. I just used a power
Year and a half.
washer at my house, so maybe they'll bring me out here to do that.
Okay. That's my only condition, Tom.
No problem. So the motion, if the board considers a motion to approve the C and D variances and amended site plan approval for AT&T as described this evening, with the conditions being call on Frank's reports, the standard conditions effect tonight so that the applicant may proceed effective immediately if they provide all other requirements of compliance. They will also clean the exterior of the block building and keep it maintained in a clean condition. They will plant placement trees near the block building and the berm area as determined by the township planner. And those are the only conditions I have. Rich,
I agree. Yeah, okay.
So move.
Second.
Have a roll call.
Mr. Trevini,
Aye.
Mr. Leonard,
Aye.
Mr. Walter,
Aye.
Mr. First,
Aye.
Ms. Christie. Aye. Chairwoman Betcha.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
where do we stand here with our September meetings? Have we got any?
September, excuse me. For the first meeting in September, we will not be meeting.
September 1st.
Several, yes, so that's September 1st. Several members were not going to be here. We actually don't have an application lined up for that. September 8th, we have 1525 Bedminster.
Okay.
October 6th, now we have Goldman.
Mhm.
And October 13th, we have 20 Route 206. There is one other application that recently came in.
On Rattlesnake Bridge Road. I wrote a letter regarding it. The application is incomplete. The checklist said, or the application said that there were no prior approvals, but there was a previous variance granted for it. And the tax certificate was blank. So with those things, there, the application is incomplete.
No, but it's something I think we can fit in if everything.
We'll see when the information comes.
Yeah, right, that's what I mean, but yeah, we can.
Right,
fit it
and
in.
then at some point, we will have to have our zoning and planning.
Yes.
And plan endorsement,
Yes, we
so
do.
I'm not sure where Frank and Larry and that is, but eventually we will have to. Or Paul, or whoever we're gonna point the finger at this point. Somebody at this point is going to let us know.
Musical chairs?
There is the chance that we might have to have a special meeting if they feel like we need to fit it in somewhere in September or October, otherwise it might not be till November, which might be fine with them, I don't know, that's.
Okay, all
That's
right,
what I
so,
know.
but we're okay for, no meeting September 1st and but September
Nope.
8th.
Okay.
So we can go with that for now, and we'll fill in.
So we have one with the 8th, but not the first.
Correct. Okay,
He might be trying to say something. Somebody might be trying to say,
and somebody,
I heard something.
no? No?
Did anyone have anything to say? Steve, did you have any?
No, thank you.
That's all. we have.
Well, I need a motion.
We
to-
do need a motion to.
Motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second.
Just when we were starting to have fun.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
You would think planning is fun.
Thanks to Richard, you have a lump.
Have a lump for you.